Personal Encounters. Hello. In the last episode of Personal Encounters, I spoke about my experience with a possible shadow person. I asked for you guys to send me any of your own encounters, and I want to thank the people who did. I'll be sharing a few of the stories that were sent in. Please enjoy. Big apologies ahead of time for anything I may mispronounce. The first story is submitted by Mahi. This is a true story that happened with my grandpa. My grandpa lived in the forest camps as he was a forest officer. He had to move a lot. He lived in India back then, so my mother and her siblings were with our grandma back at home. Grandma was assigned to a part of the forest which was very dense, and people often refused to work there. Apparently, there was a rumor going around that whoever would spend a night in the area near the river would never return. The story going around was about a runaway bride who killed her husband and ran into the nearby forest where she was killed by wild animals. People said that since her death, whoever went near the area where she was killed never returned. My grandpa never believed in those stories, so he agreed to be assigned to the post. Very few people were in that camp, some of which were just rookies and didn't know of the stories. It was my grandpa's turn to make rounds near the camp. Unexplainably, he got lost, and it was as if he was never really near the camp in the first place. He walked around and followed his training instincts, but there was no sign of camp anywhere near. Suddenly, he bumped into a woman wearing a long red sari, traditional Indian wear, often used for weddings. He couldn't see her clearly because of the dark. She told him she was lost, and he believed her. He offered her a spot in their camp, and she agreed. As they walked and walked, my grandpa felt cold. The woman was walking really slow, which was not uncommon since she was wearing a sari. But when grandpa looked behind to see if she was still keeping up, she wasn't there. A voice came from up ahead. The woman shouted and told him to catch up. My grandpa was confused, but still he walked and caught up with her. Then again, the same thing happened after my grandpa looked behind him. This repeated 3 more times. He understood what was happening. He stopped looking behind him and instead walked until he reached a river that was barely knee-deep. He quickly crossed it without looking back. When he was crossing, he heard the woman calling for him. She asked him to carry her to the other side. As she asked, my grandpa saw under the moonlight that the sari was not just red, but covered in blood. Grandpa ran. He could hear the woman shouting, "Lucky, you got away," in the native language of that village. Finally, Grandpa reached the camp and told the others everything. They didn't believe him. They said that the river was on the opposite side from where he came from and was too far away from the camp. Grandpa always said that he'll never forget that experience. The next story is submitted by Kurti. The story I'm going to tell is something that happened to one of my close friends when she was a child. I myself don't believe in the supernatural since I never had an encounter, but I've always been surrounded by people who had experiences, which has always fascinated and intrigued me. So, my friend has a lot of brushes with the supernatural, especially with the shadow people. She says she can always feel a negative energy at night around her, but the story I'm going to tell is one of the creepiest. When she was about 7 or 8 years old, she used to live in an old house. It was kind of a house you would expect to see in a horror movie, with dark corners and strange sounds. One night, when she was sleeping, she heard the sound of bangles. When she opened her eyes, she saw that it was a shadow of a woman wearing what seemed like a wedding dress. The woman had curly hair, and it seemed like she was dancing. My friend was really scared. At that time, she was sleeping with her older brother and grandmother, who were fast asleep. She decided not to wake them up, as she feared that the shadow woman would then know she was awake. My friend just closed her eyes, and after a while, the shadow woman had disappeared. The next story is submitted by Lauren. When I was younger, I always had to sleep at the foot of my parents' bed. I was always afraid to sleep in my bedroom alone. I would frequently see this man, or figure rather, that was essentially a shadow. He always had a fedora and trench coat. He would stand in the doorway of my bedroom. He never did anything crazy, just stood there, watching me. I never told my parents about him, and eventually started sleeping alone in my room when we moved out of the house. I'm 21 now, and I had completely repressed the memory and just thought it was something I had made up. That was until I saw someone make a video describing the same exact man. The comment section was filled with people claiming to have seen this shadow man, and it really freaked me out. This prompted me to Google shadow man with fedora and trench coat, and lo and behold, there were hundreds of stories and articles about this man. It was insane. They said most people saw him in a doorway while he just observed, just like me. I've never saw him again, and this has been the only semi-paranormal experience I've ever had. Our last story is submitted by Shy. I moved into the house when I was 9, and I could tell there was something weird with it the day we moved in. For 10 years, the activity in the house consisted of unexplainable sounds, doors on one closet opening every night between 1 to 3 a.m., something occasionally moving on its own, feelings of being watched all the time, and the worst of it all was the basement. The energy down there was very negative, overwhelming, and threatening. If I had to go down there, I would always end up feeling a presence right behind me trying to pull or push me down the stairs while rushing me out of the basement. My cats wouldn't go in the basement either. They would stare down there all the time, growling, hissing, and meowing angrily at whatever they could see. By the time I turned 20, both my mom and sister had moved out, leaving me alone to live in the house. I thought I would be able to handle living alone if I didn't do any of my laundry at home, but everything quickly changed. Within the first month of living alone, I was starting to experience the shadow man attacks. They were only happening when I would be getting into bed at night. The shadow man would suddenly appear and violently attack me. After a few seconds of trying to fight it off, it would vanish as quickly as it appeared. I tried to convince myself they were really just vivid nightmares and weird sleep paralysis that I could move around during, but I started having bruises, scratches, and other marks left from the attacks. The attacks increased. I was getting attacked during the day and when I was wide awake. If I was at home, I would constantly be attacked and tormented. One morning, I was awake, but still laying in bed, looking out the window and watching the snow fall outside. I was laying on my stomach when I felt a hand grab the back of my head. It forced my face down into my pillow, smothering me, and a horrible dying voice whispered the Lord's Prayer in my ear. And at the end, it let go of my head. My Bibles and crosses started disappearing after that attack. Another time, I was laying on the couch watching a movie when I felt a sharp pain through my ribs, like if needles, claws, or something sharp was shoved under my skin. It lifted from the couch until it ripped through my skin and dropped back into the couch. I still have scars across my ribs from this incident. I was often pulled and dragged off the couch when I would be watching anything. Twice I got dragged from the living room to the kitchen. I was so scared it was going to drag me into the basement. There was a dark mist that originated from the basement, and after the last time it came up from there is when I started sleepwalking for the first time in my life. This was extremely unsettling because I always woke up at the top of or actually on the basement stairs. I was so scared I was going to wake up down there. I have a bunch of pictures of the marks, injuries, and objects used to terrorize me. One night, I went to quickly take out some garbage. It was the winter's coldest night, and I was only wearing PJs because the garbage bin is only 2 feet from the door. I was home alone, so I left the door open. Right as I was about to go in, the door slammed shut and locked me outside. My keys and cell phone were inside the house. I tried to get help from a few neighbors, but it was around 1:30 a.m., so I tried picking the lock and climbing up to an open window and climb in. It was so cold that night, my hands started freezing onto the windows and doors of the house. After 2 hours outside, I had to resort to smashing my bedroom window. because I was just leaving skin and frozen blood stuck to the glass, trying to pry the windows open. I dug out a lawn decoration out from the snow to break the window with. While crawling through, my pants snagged on some glass, but wouldn't come free from tugging at them. It turned out to be a 3 to 4 inch long glass shard stuck in my leg. I had to lift my leg off of it and I tumbled to the floor. I got up to find something to cover the window with and dealt with my injuries. When I walked by the door that slammed on me, both the deadbolt and chain were locked, but no one else had been over for a week. I'm too scared to go outside without a phone and my keys now, just in case something happens. Well, there we go, folks. I could safely say that I would be very upset if any one single thing that occurred in these stories happened to me. I focused mainly on stories that were related to shadow people, but I did include one that I thought was just interesting. Please feel free to submit any type of story. I would love to do different themes. Thank you for watching, Happy New Year, and sweet nightmares.